Right. Welcome to SIG API expression to our biweekly meeting. It's the 9th of June, 2020. And we don't have an agenda. Does anyone want to bring something up now?
I'll just mention something really quick since I was working on it yesterday. This is Joe Betts. I put together some examples of some server-side apply cases where we were looking specifically at unsetting fields. I don't think we'll talk about it in depth here, but I'm going to add a link to the agenda so that anybody who wants to follow along can look at the examples we're considering. What we're very interested in at a high level is what the expected behavior of unsetting the field is. Should you be giving up ownership of a field, for example, if it's required? Should you actually be deleting the field? And there's some kind of corner cases there that we're looking at. So I'll add the link in just a moment.
Sounds good. Okay. Otherwise, let's go over the work items. We have client-side to server-side transition. I think Julian did some work. I at least got emails for it. Is he here?
Yeah, I'm working on both of those PRs. I'm hoping they're close to merge, but I need some tests or to fix some tests.
Okay.
Yeah, I think no. Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. Default associative keys are missing. I think Jenny is here today.
Yeah, I had a meeting about this with Anton a little bit ago, and I think we have a similar idea how to do it.
Yeah, I think the plan was to document in the source, like kept the approach.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. I think that's what you talked about, Joe.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Just add your link in here, Joe.
Oh, great.
There's already one. Is that?
That's it. Yep,
Okay,
Antoine beat me to it. Great.
Yay.
I saw this discussion. We have a discussion about removing managed fields from several kubectl commands.
Ooh, I have something to add to that.
Gosh, I like to be able to see them.
Yeah, and Mathieu has sent a PR to hide them in kubectl edit.
It's not linked here, is it? No. Yeah, I saw several people engaging in the discussion there.
Yeah, yes. I'd rather have a single solution for the entire problem.
Yeah. So I agree with the stance that it shouldn't be removed from the standard OYAML JSON because it should give you the API object. But aside from that, I mean, edit might not hurt. Okay. Status wiping.
I need to look at your PR.
Same status last time. Yeah, I appreciate a view of the changes, and then if they are okay or need some change, I could roll out to all internal types and probably CRDs, which will be quite some work, and then we should be good.
Should I be looking at the 89.486?
Let's see, it should be.
it's marked as whip and draft, so I don't know.
Yeah, then it should be this one. Yes. It's like it's way too many changes. Come to yeah. So mainly, I'm talking about the changes in the pod strategy because they are an example on how it will be or would be. Yeah, that's one. Let me add down here. And I think this one is merged, so I might still have to update the SMD import in my PR. Yeah, this one I think we can skip. It's on the way.
Yeah, it's mostly orthogonal to us anyway. I think we can. It's interesting to follow because we might want to use that for things, but it's mostly orthogonal.
Extending schema validation registering. Joe is at least assigned to it.
Yeah, this is, I'm going to look at this after I look at unsetting fields because I feel more unsetting fields is a little more urgent, but I do have quite a bit of stuff sitting on a document somewhere I believe we'll have to get together. So I'll try and get this after that.
Cool. Mike, I don't know if Tim is here. Did you do anything more on the API conventions?
I'm sorry. No. No, I'm sorry. I will try to get that done before we meet again.
Okay. Can we link the document here? I think we had a link.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Yes, we have. No. Okay. Topology, I don't know if Maria's here or still working on it. I don't think so. Okay.
No, and I also noticed that we don't have any documentation for the list type and list map key for CRDs in the documentation, so that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
We should do something about it.
Should I remove her from here so we know it's to do open?
Yeah, we still haven't kept track of the tasks from the pod. Maybe I'll try and do that. Yeah,
they're spread in several issues, I think, or PRs.
Yeah.
Okay. Convert CRD structural schema to SMD schema.
Yeah, nothing has happened on this since the last one.
Okay. Didn't see that one before. Anton, do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, the cherry picks are ready to merge and approved and GTM'd.
Okay, cool.
This is gonna be done by June 12th when they're gonna cut the release branches.
Mm-hmm.
Not cut the branches, but release.
And we have had the server side doesn't honor force discussion. I don't know if we came to a conclusion last time.
Oh, yeah, they never replied. I'm gonna ping them.
Oh yeah, pinged 6 CLI and nobody replied. Yeah. Should we go to their meeting and bring it up, or?
Let's see. I'm pinging Sean. He's usually replying when I ping him. And we'll see what they say, and if we have to, we'll go to the meeting.
Sounds good. And the field type is dropped. That's what we're working on partially, I think. Or you already have PR for it merged.
So
The field type dropped. I thought that's.
Oh, I think this merged, yes.
Yeah, it's merged.
But did we cherry pick it everywhere?
Well, that didn't work. Is it fixed by this one?
It's been replaced, yeah. Oh wait, what?
Is it fixed by the ignore and log all errors, or is it a different one?
Okay, that's the one. Yeah, it's a little confusing because we had multiple issues and it ended up being fixed. So this one, the field type dropped, is actually fixed here. So I think we can remove this one. Actually, I'm just going to remove it altogether.
Yeah. And I see there's automated cherry picks open, so I think that's happening.
I'm gonna keep these. There you go. Okay, good.
Yeah, that one we're working on. I'm still not sure why my PR fails. Tried rebasing, but it doesn't make any sense to the failure I see. But aside from that, we should have a fix for that. But we still need to fix that CRDs don't return an error we can check on a conversion error.
Yeah, so yeah, I was thinking about that because yeah, it sounds like, so if we can decode the incoming managed fields, we use the existing managed fields, and then we use an empty one. And I suspect what we could be doing is that if we fail to decode anything in the incoming managed fields, then we should try and decode the existing managed fields, dropping the ones that are invalid.
Yeah.
And we would end up with the empty managed fields if none of them are valid. But I feel like dropping everything if one is invalid is wrong, especially when we're using the existing one.
No, we should only drop what's broken.
So we might need two different logic for decoding. And we should probably have some decoding / validation.
Did you reply to my last message? Like, should we fail on invalid data, completely invalid data in the managed fields? Like, I would say validate, and if version is empty or the timestamp is invalid, we completely block. Or do you want to drop that?
Well, I mean, yeah. If it's coming from the new object and it's invalid, we should try the existing object. And if it's invalid in the existing object, then there's not much that can be done. We should drop this specific entry, but we shouldn't block everything because of that. Otherwise, it means you can't update the object anymore.
Yeah, right. I forgot we have the live object we can use. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, unless somebody, you would force people to specifically fix their own managed fields manually, which would be terrible.
And if there is no live managed fields, like if they are migrating to using managed fields, we would start with an empty entry. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Did we figure it? Yeah, we figured this one out. It's actually not. Oh yeah.
I don't think so.
This one we could replace with create an update CRD fails, and you have a change for that somewhere.
Yes.
I found it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So the API service is still open. I don't know how important it is for the next release.
Oh yeah, I know nothing about this one. It's kind of bad, but not so bad. Yeah, I'm going to move that down because it's not as important as the one that Adrian. Is that your name, Adrian?
Me? Andrea, yes.
Andrea, sorry.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah. Your short was Nodo, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, thanks for the pointers. I think I'm gonna be able to submit a PR in a few days, now that I kind of understand the problem a bit better and have a few tests. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're gonna have conflicts because we're actually changing this area. But it's gonna be useful, so thank you for doing that.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah, and we still have this don't track manage field. Sometimes I think it was Vince.
Oh yeah. But again, I suspect we should just make the entire event atomic.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a good use case for tracking some requests and not some others. And I think we had other dimensions. I can't remember what they are, but
yeah, on a per request basis, that sounds wrong with the current concepts.
yeah.
Okay, and when we have our backlog where nothing changed, I think. Yeah.
I'm very sad we still don't have a declarative field manager, but
I don't know why. For 2 years, wasn't that what I first started working on when I apply? Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway.
Long and distant future. Yeah, we have almost an hour more, half an hour more if we want to, but I don't know if.
Yeah, do we want to talk about Joe's thing? Do we want to talk about Mike's thing? We have a chance to discuss about this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about mine if that's useful. If anybody wants to pop up in the document, it's the unsetting fields examples one. I can just briefly, and not that one. Let's see. Let me share the link.
Tim is either working on it right now or has a lot of tabs open, including this one.
Here's the link if you'd open that. So just what I did was pretty simple. I just took a bunch of different cases of different types of fields. So types of fields include optional non-defaulted fields, optional defaulted fields, required fields, both primitive and complex, atomic maps and lists. Sorry, did I set the right link? I just put a link in chat that's actually the right document.
Are you sure?
Chat.
I did the wrong link. Try again. Oh, sorry. I put it in Zoom chat. Let's put it in Slack chat.
I mean, I see it in the Zoom chat. But I don't see the right one.
Oh, that's probably my fault.
I've copied the link. I think it's the right one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. We got it. And what I was trying to do is make sure I understood the current behavior of whatever happens when you unset different fields. And there's a couple cases that seemed like they were worth discussion. So the main ones were, the behavior seems to be that if you have an optional field and you unset it, that you give up ownership of it. So if you have a config, if you basically have the YAML in object and there's an optional field there and you just delete it, it doesn't actually delete the field or its contents. It's still there. It's just you've given up ownership of it. But if you set it explicitly to null, then you will delete it. If it's defaulted, then when you set it to null, it'll reset to the default. The behavior for required is fairly consistent with that. If you unset it, then you're just giving up ownership of it, which is the same behavior as you get with optional. Now, if it's complex, then I seem to observe different behavior. If I unset the object or set it to null, both of those would remove the data. This is one that I tested in a variety of different cases and seemed to be the behavior. If it has required fields in it, then this will often result in a validation error. Atomic maps and lists kind of work the way you would expect if you're removing an item from them. You're just changing the contents of that thing, so you just get that behavior. That was fairly uninteresting, so 6 and 7 are not that interesting. 5 was only mildly interesting. That's the case where you have like an associative list, and the behavior seems to be that if you remove the item, it gets removed, but I know that there are special cases there that I'm not covering. Antoine pointed me to some of the logic in the updater that accounts for the history of an object if it's an associative list with, that's not atomic. So there were some special cases there, but the thing I was most interested in learning more and talking to others about was the seeming difference behavior between case 1, 2, and 3, which seemed consistent, and case 4, which seemed to differ from them. So whether or not you have a primitive or complex field seems to change the behavior of unsetting the field.
Quick question, does it do the same thing if you set it to null or if you completely unset?
I tried these multiple times. It seems to be that regardless of which of those two operations you do, you get the same result. Let me just double check here in my notes.
You have an example, right?
Yeah, if you drop down to case 4.
And when you guys say the word unset, what you mean is omit from what you say are sending to the server, right?
Yeah. So exactly.
Maybe omit would be clearer because, at least for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to change the wording here to whatever makes the most sense for people. I'll switch to omit. But yeah, if you actually look at the example, what I'll show is in strikeout the contents that was deleted from that object. In this case, I deleted like a whole stanza, the whole resources stanza. And the outcome of that was that then if I read it back, the resources was an empty map. Then if I set it to null, the outcome was the same. It was exactly the same. So
I wouldn't expect that. I suspect that's a bug.
Yeah, we should probably. What were you expecting the behavior to be?
I would have expected nothing to change.
Right. So then you would have expected it to be consistent with 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
I would have expected if you omit, nothing changes, and if you set it to null, then it's reset to empty.
Yeah, that's what I expected too. So that's why I was surprised by that one. Okay. So that was one of the big findings. I think then the other big topic on this is a little higher level, which is, do we feel that these semantics give us the ability to do everything we want? Is the goal that there is always a way to both remove a data element and always a way to give up ownership?
Yeah, there's probably many different things here, but one that I really don't like is, I think if you set a field to null because you want to remove it, you're going to end up owning it. And if it's being defaulted, it's going to look like you own it, the default, even though you don't or shouldn't. I don't know if I have a good field that does that, but I was
So you-
expecting.
Yes, that was actually something I had noticed too, was that it remains managed when you set it to null.
Yeah, so you're saying the way to unset and remove should be the same, at least there should be a same way to do both?
I don't know if I'm saying that. I think there is a difference between saying I want these to be, I want to casually unset these, and I want these to be unset.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost like think of the possible things somebody might want to do. So one would be say, I just don't care about this field anymore. I'm giving up ownership. That's one thing. Another thing would be like, I do want this to be nulled. Like I want to clear the field, but I'm not saying I don't own it anymore. I still think I own this whole thing. I just want that to be the value, right? I want it to be the unset value or the emitted value, which is, has semantics. And I think Anton's point might be that there's a third case, which is you might want to do some combination of those two things, right? Like you might want to unset and give up ownership as well. Am I saying that right, Antoine?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You would have to probably do that in 2 steps though, and that's one way to do it. It's not amazing, but it's one way to do it.
Yeah, so it's possible. But definitely not in like the happy path flow.
Well, yeah, let me just probe that a little bit, right? So as soon as you talk about something that's get done in 2 steps, you have to ask what happens if the guy that wants to do 2 steps crashes between the two.
Right.
We have this level-based way of processing things. People are not writing controllers today that examine the managed fields to figure out whether they have to modify the managed fields.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And then one of the reasons I started this experiment was there was some concern particularly from users that were doing, kind of like maybe you have a checked in code or YAML or something. They were very concerned with having behavior that seemed to be consistent if you performed a series of operations, and whether or not you actually applied those to Kubernetes as a single operation or individually as a series of operations. So like, does operation A applied and then operation B applied have the same effect as like a squash commit of A and B applied all at once? And so in those kinds of flows, doing things like the unset here was a concern, because if you unset a field and then set it again, then it might have been that you intended to, if you intended to delete an optional field, then the behavior seems right. If you intended to well, actually it won't be if in the defaulted case, because in the defaulted case, what could happen is you could clear the replicas and then it could default to some very low value, like it'll default to 1, even if you had it at 100 before. And then if you realize that was a mistake and then set it back again, you'll get very different behavior depending on those operations. So I think the question was, I think maybe one way to phrase that question is, should the behavior be swapped where unsetting removes optional fields and you don't have this way of giving up ownership? But then, I mean, would that be better for me or users? And if so, then how would we allow a way to unset fields? Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable way to kind of ask the question? Like, if you saw somebody remove an optional field, would you expect that they are deleting the field intuitively, or would you have expected the giving up of ownership?
Well, one guide is existing the kinds of merge or existing kinds of patching, right? In which case, omitting means I'm not asking for a change in this.
Yes, that's what we did, but it's confusing for some people.
Yeah. So one flow to consider might be that you've got a YAML and it doesn't yet have a field, and then somebody adds that field with a value, and then somebody else goes, no, we don't want that in there, and they just basically revert that change. The outcome of that will be actually that you added the field and took ownership of it, set it to value, and then you gave up ownership of it but left it set to that value.
I think one of the things we initially advertised, at least that's how I understood it, what we initially advertised with the new apply flow is you only send what you want to change. If things change because you don't send something anymore, that might be off the path of what I understood apply to be. But we have to clean up ownership at some point if you don't apply it, so I see why that's like it. But just leaving something from your applied manifest, I'm not sure.
What I think I can do is there had been a couple. I think the first point I think Anton made was really good, which was the case number 4 here not being possible to unset. I think proposes one alternative where we just make that consistent. So what I could do is list out a couple cases. One is where we make this a little more consistent. One is where we show the outcome of the alternative where, like, if you just unset something, you're removing it and you lose these kind of abilities to give up ownership, which I don't actually think is a good case by itself because now you have no way to give up ownership, but I could still list it out and kind of show that consequences of that. And then maybe try and, one option I'd heard was, how delete options in Kubernetes allows you to specify how delete behavior works. Maybe we should consider an alternative where you have a way of saying through options that you're doing something different, but then that creates like more permutations of behavior, right?
Actually, it removes permutations because it says you have to do the same thing throughout the object. It doesn't let you do it, one thing at one place and the other thing at the other place.
Yeah, that's true. So I could at least list out that option. So we have, and I can't really think of too many more options in those 3. So if we had like 3 options and we kind of looked at them very carefully, I think maybe that would be enough for us to lock down what we think would be best.
Are we sure we want to, are we really sure we want to change ownership based on the data, or would it be an option to have a dedicated API to give up ownership or change ownership? Like we can already change the managed fields. So if we make that easier to give up fields you own, we wouldn't need to approximate what the user really wants. Because we could tell you do kubectl disown or give whatever, and you can give up a field in an object.
Yeah, that's becoming imperative. That's pretty bad.
Okay.
I mean, you would have to run a command. You can't do GitHubs anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay.
Could anybody think of any other alternatives besides those 3? I can start listing them out and maybe we can sync up on them probably maybe midweek or something.
Okay, there's something interesting to note though, is that we have more semantic than we think we do, because we're always processing the patch, the applied patch, as a unstructured object, not a built-in type. So we have the ability to differentiate between unset, null, and empty, right?
Yes, that's true.
If we send a pod directly to the pod endpoint, we would lose this difference. But because the patch is actually deserialized as unstructured, we have this nuance. So I suspect we can do something about that. We could figure out maybe an extra way of having additional semantics.
Yeah, that might be feasible.
So we need
and
to
what is
we
your
need to probably list the different semantics that we care about, and then see how we can encode them. But would it make sense to distinguish the different semantics, like what can the user actually want for different use cases, and see if we can encode them in a different way?
Yeah, I can try and break that out. I think I can take a variant of this table where we maybe focus more on all the possible set values you can set something to, and then what the outcome of that is.
I would do it the other way around. I would start from what is the person trying to do and how can we encode that?
Okay. That's a little more like a habit now then, right? Like we've got, like, how do you remove the data element? How do you give up ownership?
Yeah.
But then maybe try and fill this out a little more.
What happens if you set a list, if you don't remove a list item but set it to null? Will it
That's
have a
usually
null
that
list item?
you can't have a list item to null because you need the associative keys.
Yeah, but only
Yeah.
in an associative list.
Yeah. If you're talking about an atomic list, then it doesn't matter. If you're talking about a set, it's probably going to fail.
Yeah, I don't think it actually works out in the structure. If you're talking about case number 5, I don't actually think it works out as to have a null anywhere, because you always have to have the key somewhere, and then the rest of it's just fields. So you're just acting on those fields at that point. Which actually makes case number 5 really hard. If we want to have a way to give up ownership uniformly, that's actually the one where I'm a little going to be scratching my head on, like, what could we do?
Do we need a way to give ownership on every field where it's applicable? Like, do we agree on that, or do we know that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think we're going to have to decide, right? Like we can clearly support making it possible to remove datum elements everywhere, and clearly you must have a way to do that. Otherwise, the API is going to be viewed as incomplete. But then, whatever semantics we have left, I think we've been trying to use to give up ownership, and I don't know how to do 5 yet. I think 4 is possible.
Does 0.4 mean this kind of field has always to be owned by somebody?
Right now, I don't know, short of hacking the managed fields from the client, which I don't think you're supposed to be doing, I don't know of a way to do it. So if anybody does, please tell me, but you can see in my examples, I tried both setting it to null and unsetting the field. I couldn't find a way to give up ownership.
What does it mean for migrations to server-side apply? The person first applying would own all fields, right? Or we give it to a special field manager. What was the way of doing that?
I'm actually not sure what happens there. Do you know, Antoine, when you're migrating?
Can you repeat the question?
When migrating to server-side apply, we give ownership to some field manager.
So what do you call migration? Someone's going to run apply with kubectl, which sends the kubectl manager, and we're just using the last applied annotation to avoid conflicts, but that's the only specific thing we do. When you run apply, you're going to acquire the fields based on what you sent.
Yeah, and if there are fields that you didn't send, like optional, non-default, complex fields, we wouldn't drop them. We would give ownership to somebody else, like to some field manager that we determine.
I mean, it's not going to give it to someone else. It's going to stay the way it was before. So if somebody had them, then they're gonna keep them.
Yes, but if okay, yeah. But once you have them, you can't disown them anymore. Okay.
Yeah. I feel
What
like
would- what would-
I know about that.
What would you guys think of an alternative where instead of having unsetting or omitting an applied object give up ownership, that by default deleted the value? And so then basically you lose the ability to give up ownership by default, but then maybe you had like a apply options or something where you could do something different. What do you guys think of an alternative like that?
I'm not super excited about having a different command because it's not going to work well with the GitOps. I don't know if we're ever going to be able, because of the multi-versions, to reset the fields.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jenny probably would know better, but I don't think that's going to work. And
sorry, what do you mean by resetting fields? I missed that part.
So you're saying if we omit a field, it's going to be emptied?
Yeah, basically you take the unsets from how to give ownership and move them over into how to remove data element. And so you lose you end up with a lot of not possibles on how to give ownership, but then you get, like, if you remove an optional field from the applied object, it just deletes it, which is, the reverse of the operation of adding the field, right? So if you had an optional field and you set the value, you add it, you delete that value, you delete it again. So those are now symmetric, which is probably the only attractive thing about that, right? It's the only thing that's.
I mean, you have 2 points. One, you don't know what fields are option null defaulted. We don't have that in the Open API.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, because we have to manage multiple versions, I don't know if we'll be able to reset the field.
Yeah, we're circling now. I also don't know what you mean by be able to reset the field. Are you thinking about can a client do something, or can the developers do some evolutionary step?
We can't.
Who's we?
I don't know. We, as in this group of people, the people who actually implement the code. I don't know if we have the ability to unset fields when they've been unset by someone else, by the apply when they've been omitted from the config.
Surely we can implement whatever.
If you stop specifying replicas, so if you omit replicas, I don't
know
if
the client omits replicas.
Yeah, if the client omits replicas when they apply, I don't know if the code can unset the replicas field from the object.
Surely, as developers of the code, we can make it do whatever we want.
No,
but we don't know the history of the field, so we can't use it.
The problem is that they may be in a different version, and the replicas field may have a different name in a different version, and we don't know what this field is going to be.
So you're saying it's really a problem of mismatch between the version that the client is speaking to and the version that is stored.
Yeah.
Okay, valid point. I was also going to raise the concern that I think what is being suggested is the opposite of how JSON merge patch works, which is going to be an intuitive problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, but the JSON patch or JSON merge patch, they're very much entirely.
I said JSON merge patch, not JSON patch.
Yeah, whichever I think in this case, but you typically say what you want to happen. It's very much edge-based, not level-based.
Right. Yes, that's right.
So we're trying to slightly differentiate from that, right? We're trying to describe the level, not describe the edge.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think the version problem is a really good point. I agree. I don't know how we would work around that
Yeah,
because we're always applying SSA on unversioned objects, right? So we've already converted them.
and one of the specific details that is problematic there is that we need to apply the default before we do the conversions from one version to another, which means that we've lost a lot of the intent once we've converted from one version to the other. That's the main problem with the multi-version, is that we lose the intent because we have to default before we convert.
Okay. That's actually a really important thing that I need to carry through when I think through all of these cases through. Because yeah, that does lock down some of our alternatives here.
Yeah, so I'm just going to make a high-level observation here. So you're taking an API, which is indeed level-based rather than edge-based, and really trying to wedge an edge-based operation into it, or infer an edge-type operation from it. You know, are you really setting yourselves up for an impossible task?
Most likely, yeah. So we're trying to find a good compromise.
Let me challenge a little more basically. Is it doomed to failure? It's you know, seems like such a fundamental mismatch. I'm not sure there is a useful compromise.
I guess we'll try and figure it out. I feel like we're not so far from being there. So
all right, I'm not going to try to stop you. All right, go ahead.
I don't think we're very far away from where we want to be. But I agree it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to do everything we want. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that we'll have to make sacrifices and say, okay, this use case is not perfect. Maybe someone is going to have to apply twice because they need to go in this intermediate state where they'll have to somehow express the change they want to make through a declarative level-based API by making two steps, by going through two steps. They will have to. I'm pretty sure we'll have to. I agree with you.
Yeah, and now you're forcing orchestration on me on the writers of the controllers, or really on the controllers. You're making the job of the controllers harder.
Oh, I'm not okay. So if you're talking about controllers, I think it's slightly different than if you're talking about users. I would expect controllers to be able to and to have to use the patches in some cases. I think for the controller, it's fine. If they want to remove something, they can send a patch to remove it.
Well, let me just put it this way. Today, the controllers think, you know, the update operation is, you know, it's put right there. They're stating a level, not an edge. And if you infer under the covers, you infer some levels from it, and that's not equivalent to the. Sorry, if you infer some edges from it, and that's not equivalent to the level that's set, you're kind of subverting the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I see your concern, Mike. The optimist in me hopes that this can be conveyed in enough of a level-like way that it's still sane. Because I think that's kind of conceptually what you're trying to do, right? Like what you're trying to provide to a user is like you're seeing part of the object and you're trying to set the level of that part of the object. I think at the highest level, I think it still seems sane to me.
Let me try another approach.
But
what's really another view of what's going on is you've really introduced some additional metadata here, which is this ownership metadata.
Yeah.
And right, so the concern you're really having is that we now need a way for controllers to express the levels of not only the data that they have been traditionally setting, but also the metadata. So
Right.
maybe
Yes.
the way to do it is just face up to it that way and say, hey, if the controller wants to manipulate the metadata, the controller can set the level of the metadata.
Can you really, I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. Can you explain what you mean by levels and edges in the context?
Sure, right. It's kind of a generic metaphor, right? The controllers will say, here is the state that I want to be in the object. And edges is, here are the changes I want to make to the object.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I've been struggling with when I've worked through these cases is that you know, I came to this as a naive user, hadn't developed SSA myself, and I was like, what do I expect to happen when I change the applied object, right? And so a lot of it was based on like, I have these fields and I expect certain things to happen when I change them. And so I think one of the goals is to, you know, have least surprise, right? Like have things do what I expected them to do as a naive user, or at least have them do something. If it is a surprising, at least there be a really good reason why it has to work the other way. And I think, you know, my naive expectation was that if I set an optional field to a value and then delete it again, my naive one was actually that it would just, you would actually delete the value. So I was actually expecting something different for 1, 2, and 3. But then, you know, if there is a really good reason, like I think, you know, the fact that these are version objects and you can still do that through null, that's, I think, starting to get there. But then you run into problems where like you've got case number 5, like how would I express that I want to give up ownership of a item in an associative map or list? I don't know how to do that. So it kind of feels like, yeah, it's starting to, by trying to allow us to manipulate both the seen and the unseen thing at the same time through the same objects is starting to get a little challenging.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make this, you know, statement a little bit stronger, right? I mean, we're talking HTTP, right? We're kind of trying to be REST here, right? Put says I'm supplying the state, the level, right? If you take the level that I supply, infer some edges, and the net effect is different from the state that I sent, I'm actually going to be offended.
Yeah, but that's literally what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to say you can send partial level of the state, not the entire state.
So maybe this needs a little more radically different conception then. You know, because traditionally, you know, put says, here is the whole state of the object. And if you want to say, I'm supplying the state of part of the object, that starts to sound like a kind of patch now.
But we're doing patch for apply.
Oh, well, maybe I'm confused. Does any of this apply? Are we talking about patches or updates here? Puts or patches?
You make sense, Mega. You make complete sense. And that's why apply is actually a patch, right? It's a patch where you don't send the changes, but what you want as a partial state. Partial.
I'm sorry, I misinterpreted a remark several minutes ago.
Yeah, I think most of everything you're saying is still valid though, Mike, right? Like you're describing like you expect certain behavior to happen in a certain way when you make these changes, right? Because a lot of what this is going to be is like somebody literally just editing a YAML file somewhere, and then later that gets applied.
If we're talking about controllers and they want to explicitly give up ownership and they can't do it through apply, they can still issue a patch that either manipulates either an update which is put to change the managed fields or do what they want there. I think focus for me when we started discussing this was the actually user and not controllers. But we have to think about controls as well. But from a controller, I would expect that it can actually do a second request if it wants to give up ownership more than from a user.
Well, again, the thing about controllers is they are decidedly, level based in the way they're programmed. So you have to think about how to write a controller that can survive a crash at any time in a level based way.
I see.
Well, I think we're out of time. So what I'll do is I'll continue to break out the possible alternatives that we've discussed so far and start listing out all the problems that we've hit with them. And maybe I'll try and grab a couple people later this week and see if we can hammer over and see what alternatives are left and how we can make the best of them. Does that sound like a reasonable path forward?
It's a very good plan.
Okay, thank you all so much for the feedback. I learned a couple of very useful things.
Great, and I think we're through. So thanks for being here, and I'll stop recording.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kevin. Thanks, Mike.